that. And there's everybody around the experience. So, I think that's the big part of it. But the other aspect of it is successfully implementing this requires, modification of the people, process, technology. That's a key theme here. If you have to have a strategy. What are you trying to do? And then, by the way, technology serves the strategy. As I'm supposedly a tech guy, we work for the business. Our job is to enable the business. Okay, we don't do anything that other than let's do upgrades for keep things current on our own. Okay, we definitely want to strive and work the business. But those are essentially the key aspects of this. And some of the examples of where this type of disruption is occurring. I mean, for example, in the financial services industry, you've got new channels that are out there, new partners. So, for example, in financial services, who are some of the key players? You get Amazon and Google. They have $1 billion. $1 trillion. They can do a lot of stuff, right? So you've got other different parties that are coming in. You've got fintechs that are coming out and monetizing and accelerating through automation, payment processes, and things of that sort. So, digital disruption and digital transformation is changing everything in terms of the way people interact. And it's actually, and here's another interesting slide here, the use case, as we call it, revenue transformation, revenue leakage. And I'll tell you, when people embark on these transformation programs, there's a reason. Okay, they're not just doing it because they're nice people or they have this epiphany one day that we're going to do a transformation. They have a reason for doing it. And typically, there's 3 scenarios that occur. You get the protect scenario where you're a distressed business. Okay, where you're being threatened. You really kind of have to do something like that, or you're going to go extinct, right? And I think a good example. Look at Eastman Kodak, right? They are the greatest film company in the world. They're also bankrupt right now. Okay, because they bet on the wrong horse. The old AT&T up in New Jersey, right? Long distance. Oh, that's what we want to do. They're broke. Now you've got this quote AT&T here, which is focused on multimedia content, right? And Wi-Fi. Stress companies where they really need to focus on, big strategic investments in digital capabilities because, the customer expectations are different. I mean, for a really good, anything in retail is a good example of that. Where you really need to change, what the experience is for the customer. What do they want? They want to be able to get on their devices. They want to look at things on their devices. They want to be able to order on their devices. And then you've got things like machine learning and automation, right? So, understanding based on a profile, what they're interested in. I mean, I don't know if you've had this experience. I have. I order something on Amazon. If you go on Facebook, all of a sudden these ads start popping up for similar topics. That's all automation. So they're trying to build an experience around you based on your known preferences. And that's where some of the technology can support individual channels. And then we talk about the growth aspect of it. And that's a big part too, because they talk about expanding the customer base and service offerings. And that is a huge opportunity. I did a project, a carve out from a major bank, right? And I stood up a little financial services company. They were transaction. They would do a real estate transaction, get the financing done, and go on to the next client. But they wanted to get to a subscription-based model, which was long-term, right? And the way they did that, they didn't have the data to provide the information. They wanted to provide insights into the markets, the different geographic markets around the world. So, a lot of their clients are in Tokyo, for example. What's going on in the real estate business in Tokyo? To do that, you need a lot of data. So, what we built for them was a whole data lake infrastructure. We collected all this data from all these different transactions around the world. And then you go out and you augment it, right? So you go out and buy data from other sources and mash it up. And, I think there's an opportunity there, with offerings that they had on their mobile devices, that they were able to get subscription-based services and get additional revenue. And you see that a lot with, cars and other kinds of equipment. We did one at Caterpillar, right? Caterpillar, they sell dump trucks. Now, the typical model on a dump truck is you buy the dump truck, they have a service contract, there's your dump truck, right? But they had this epiphany one day and said, okay, nobody wants to own a dump truck. So what they did is like dump truck as a service, okay? So their idea is you come in, you do 10 loads, here's your price per load. You have an OpEx expense for this, right? You don't carry the capital item on your books. But I mean, the ability to price something like that was data driven. And again, back to our friends at Gulfstream. I mean, the CIO there was the one who gave me one of the best quotes ever. Says, I have a lot of data, but not a lot of knowledge. And I see that time after time after time, the monetization of data. And, for example, the guy who does all the flight safety down there, I met with this person. They have sensors all over these G650s and they fly them around. They collect all this data, but then, they have to kind of redo stuff all the time because they don't have efficient methods for storing it. But, the ability to pull all those things together feeds into their engineering process, right? So it helps in terms of quality and overall satisfaction. So, those are generally the use cases, but there has to be a reason for it. I mean, they don't want to just do it. There's either a new business opportunity, either we're losing market share, we got to do something, or else, we're protecting ourselves. Why do these things fail? And this is a McKinsey article. I like this McKinsey article. Typically, they talk about the fuzzy definition, okay, and that is critical. Just doing something to do something sake is a waste, right? You really need to have a strategy tied to revenue, so it's monetized and you measure it effectively, and then implement it, right? So the technology is such that, or the strategy is such that this is what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to measure it. Here's the business case. Here's the financing. Misunderstanding the economics is another big part of it. But, sometimes is that, delivering the value in things and understanding the economics of a digital solution. I have another great example of that. A customer, what you perceive as value, what the customer actually views as value. I mean, we have one client where they had this offering where they'll help their retail environment, and they offered this product. And then they looked at it and they said, we're not making money on this thing. Because they thought it was something the clients liked, and it's like, they're not really using it, we're not monetizing it, but that was a misalignment in terms of understanding the strategy. Ecosystems, overlooking ecosystem. Okay, that's the thing. Digital should be all encompassing. Okay, it's not just one line of market, not one industry, but it's got to surround you. And there's going to be organizational changes, there's going to be process changes, and all the rest of it, fits together there. But people screw these things up when they talk about live in two worlds, that's exactly what that's about. Where we're kind of doing things the old way and we're kind of doing it the new way, but it's cultural change between the two groups. Yeah, you need to digitize the current business and the other ones, but this is kind of the main genesis of this. But what does it mean to be digital? This is, kind of our flow. Let me try to finish. Can you guys see that, or is that what fuzzy?
We can see it.
You can? Just check it. There we go. But really, it's a couple of different things to think about here, where you've got, confluence of rapidly evolving technologies and paradigms. Okay, these are things that enable it. Okay, so just think of all these new technologies, social media, mobile devices, artificial intelligence, and automation. The whole idea of business process automation, that's BPA now instead of BPO. IoT, where you're getting information from lots of different sources, robotics, 5G, but the box in the middle, and by the way, cloud computing should be on there as well. Okay, all of this is enabled by cloud. So I mean, the first thing I always tell people when they work on digital strategies, go to cloud. We got to go to cloud because all this stuff is hooked up through cloud services. And nobody from Microsoft here today. We have Thursday, we have Microsoft here. But then we have the strategy side of this, and this is where it gets all critically important in terms of how does it mean. The 360 stakeholder experience, understanding all the people around you, right? And ensuring you consider all the different channels and accesses you might have. Modernize technology and data platforms. And the technology can be, has to be scalable, flexible, agile. That's not just three words, it's always the measure. I mean, we do IT due diligences on an acquisition. Are they on cloud? Are they flexible, scalable, agile? If they're not, you have to replace stuff, there's an investment. Business strategies for the digital economy, making sure that you understand the overall strategy. And then the end here, we've got the dominance. What are the goals here? We're trying to grow revenue, increase valuation. We want to do leadership. I mean, so we want to have a clear definition of where we're trying to get to. So that's kind of what it means, but it's a change in mindset. It's all about organizational process change and clearly understanding your target and having a business case to do it. Comments, questions?
So you're approaching, you're working with a client. Is this considered part of intake?
This is, yeah, we'll talk about intake. Okay. That's an interesting part. That's actually the next thing we're going to get to is let's talk about, how we do. I'm going to go to this first, then we'll go to I'll skip the next one. I mean, really, when we look at, and we want to build a digital strategy, and then we'll go to project management. But when you're building a digital strategy, we talk about all those elements. You got to look at them all. And we call, like, our 5 lenses approach is what we do. But really, what are the key things you look about? Look at the stakeholder experience. Let's consider who our customers are. And it's not just our thinking, okay? It's got to be the thinking of talk to your friendly customers, okay? What do they think? What's it like doing business with us? And also getting expertise in the industry out there as well, because there's other people with other perspectives, but it's really digging deep and thinking, who are those customers and what is their experience? The agile organization, okay, speed. Okay, you need to have your company that usually is product aligned, one vertical, lots of innovation and incubation. Sometimes things work, sometimes things don't, which is fine. And you need to have executives who are okay with that. I mean, I did a project in with a fertilizer company. Half their employees, you go down to their cafeteria and there's a box there. You put stuff in and then they collect ideas and things. But that level of innovation was engendered with the business, and the management was supportive of it. So that's a big part of it. And then we have the whole thing around the technology that's going to support it. And then they call it intelligent operations, usage of sensors, mobile devices, IoT, just getting lots of data. I mean, the thing about data, and this is key here, is that you're creating more data every year than you've ever created in the past. And you just have massive, huge amounts of it. It's going into these huge cloud databases, making sure you understand it. Spend the time investing in an enterprise data strategy to support all this. But those are the kind of things we typically look at.
Just another kind of client question. Does your clients approach you from the standpoint of, we want to do digital, or we have problem X and we don't know if that's representative of this or not? Can you help us?
The latter.
The latter.
A lot of times they don't even know what the problem is. I mean, sometimes they have a suspicion of what's going on,
Yeah.
but they don't know exactly what the problem is.
Yeah.
It's typical. I mean, in terms of we want to do modernization, then they come in, I think this definition is they don't really understand how encompassing it is, and they really need to understand all the aspects of it. And we'll help them through that. But those are, and there are clients like that who are very sophisticated to get that. The other ones are like, I had one who talked about, well, I've got these hot spots. Okay, this isn't working quite well. They don't know why. And then you have to figure that out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, what the experience is. And, having done these, there's patterns. I mean, this is spanning all industries. You can look at it and say, okay, their data's wrong. They don't understand this. There's a problem with the customer misalignment. And there's all kinds of challenges. And, this is kind of the, what I call like the digital maturity spectrum. Okay. And a couple comments on this. In a perfect universe, everybody should be digitally native. It doesn't work like that. Okay. Yeah. Not everybody can or needs to be, right? I mean, a lot of companies, the first thing you want to do is, where should we be based on our industry, right? So, I think a lot of it is, do we have a vision? Is it aligned to revenue? Do you understand if we're making money on this or not? And if it's not, get rid of it. Because that's the good thing about digital innovation, right? And that's like, DevOps and all, where you've got with Kubernetes and all those types of things, and microservices, you can innovate quick, right? If it doesn't work, chuck it, do the next one.
Yeah.
So you got to be making sure it's aligned with revenue. Organization is aligned. It's also usually typically product. We've got incubation layers. And then you've got, customer. We're focused on our customers as much as we're doing that. Technically agile, we can move quick, innovative. Supply chain transparent. Okay, we need to see the supply chain. And that's a big challenge for us. I mean, I was in New York City recently for the last 7 months, and they had a retail company, and they didn't understand their inventory. So they would go into their SAP S4 HANA instance and look at the inventory and says, oh, we have 100 of these, right? We'll sell 100 of these. They make a commitment to Target, so we'll sell you 100. Only 85 show up. Target come back and says, well, you're short 15, and by the way, it's going to cost you $10,000 each for the penalty. And they're spending like 3, 4, 5 million a month in penalty charges. That's not good, right? It pisses them off. And people who are sophisticated retailers, they don't have a lot of patience for it. Walmart doesn't have a lot of patience for that. You deal with them. Right. And if you've ever been up to Bentonville, where they put you in the room with the plastic chairs, I mean, it's quite an experience. Their tech shop is right up here on Custer Road. The Walmart store there is where the innovation shop is. But those are some of the attributes you need to think about. And typically when you build a roadmap, you got to address them piecemeal. Usually you need to put a technical foundation in first, put the plumbing in, right? Then you go from there, then you think about the processes, and then you can have the innovation going for the products. So this is kind of where we are from a maturity perspective. We'll usually do a maturity assessment on them and score it out. some of them are good, and you know, they need to understand that prioritization. Yeah, so I mean, the question is if we're going to build a digital strategy, how do we do it? I'm trying to make sure we have time for management side, but you know, we build out a digital strategy, and typically there's a couple aspects of this. We have a roadmap that we progress on. You want to understand what the strategy and vision is. And typically, when we're working with clients, it's not just here's my strategy and vision. It's like, no, what is your strategy and vision? What markets are you going in? What revenue are you seeking? Who are the customers? What are the growth rates? What are the products? How are you innovating? We really have an in-depth business strategy and vision to where you want to go. And there's revenue and there's money attached to it, and it's measurable. Then we build a business blueprint, which is, you know, what are the commercial and operational aspects that are required to support this? We shape it, accelerate the path, and then we can go ahead and incubate where we iterate on the model, kick it around a little bit until we get the product that comes out. Then we build, implement, and scale. So then we have to go ahead and implement it after we've shaken this whole thing out. So, you know, the digital, the transformation, the aspects of it, you know, typically, you know, if we talk about the drivers of transformation, talk about customer experience, efficient operation, modern business models, compelling solutions. But, you know, how do we build this? That's the key question. And let's go to the next slide here. Typically, what we do when we're doing one of these sessions is we have these workshops. And what they really are is mapping the customer journey. Okay, it's a big deal. Okay, but we're typically what it is, you know, we want to go out there and build what we think the customer journey is, and then we build the solutions around it. You know, some of the key aspects, just the voice of the client, customers, and market. That's critical. Okay, voice of the client. That's your friendly client, and you say, hey, you know, oh, that's the person. So, you know, understand, you know, what are you trying to do in terms of your clients? Do some interviews. Voice of the marketplace. Okay, what is best practice? What are some of the industry leaders telling me? Those are the kinds of things you want to understand. Really gather information about the marketplace. Understand your customer touch points, persona. Persona is a friendly customer. Okay, you sit there and you talk to your friend Bill, who you've been working with from your client for 10 years or 5 years, or Mary, and just say, look, what's it like working with us? And the thing you're going to find is they have a different perspective than you do. You guys are slow. I make an order, it takes you guys forever. I call your customer service line, it takes them 6 months. And their perception is a lot different than that. And you want to build it out into, you know, customer journey, and then you want to have an vision of what the customer experience, and then you build out your capabilities. And the capabilities are the things that are projects that you implement. Okay, that's where you have a roadmap. It takes a while to do it, but it's continuously measurable. So, you know, these workshops typically take, you know, 3 days, 4 days, something like that. And this is one that, you know, an example of one we did recently with a doctor's office, right? A hospital provider. You know, what is the experience like? Well, there's 3 ways: before you get there, when you're visiting, and then afterwards. You know, and
what's your representation on the journey sessions in terms of levels in the organization?
You want to have, well, it depends. It's an interesting question. You want to have, you know, C-level executive, but also operational people who actually do the conversations. You know, you want, I mean, it's good to have, you know, my perception or your perception if you're the, you know, senior vice president or whatever, but the person who's on the phone and actually doing this stuff and does this day to day, they're the ones with the interesting information, because they're the ones who make the customer happy or piss them off and say, we're not going to do business with you. Mm-hmm. But here's an example here. There's several steps as we, you know, map these things out. Now, typically, what would happen is you say, okay, let's go walk through the journey. So we would sit there and get everybody in a room, and typically, you know, try to do 3 days if we can get it intensive. If you can't, break it up, but, you know, go through all the different steps and understand what is our strategic vision, what are we doing well, what do we want to do, what does our customer say about this, and really come through this and say, okay, for order referrals, what are the good things? Okay, the orders are, well, you know, they're pretty quick about it, they're on top of it. Referrals are like, you know, I need another doctor, but it takes forever. I have to call multiple times. You know, that type of information all factors into the kind of remediation that you're going to have to address. Patient visits, you know, that's the patient visit where you're actually at the patient's office and understanding what the visit is like. You know, you get in there, you check in, you give your insurance, you walk through, you go see the doctor, he checks you out, you know, you leave, you make your next appointment, and then you have the post where you have to pay and deal with the insurance and get the labs and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, this is an example of a real project, actually, but, you know, and typically, after doing those workshops, I mean, what we came up with from an output here was a whole series of different projects that came out of this. Okay, and these are things that would like upgrade the telephones, okay? Enhanced integration, you have to go to multiple systems for these things. Some enhanced digital scheduling, well, it takes forever to do this kind of thing. Enhanced patient portal, I mean, that's an option for doctors, but a lot of times you want to get the stuff on your phone and you can look at your labs on the phone. I mean, these are all things that, you know, come out of these things that are things that are executable from a project perspective. New operating models, standard operating procedures and knowledge bases. So, you know, we come up with all these ideas. And then we have the whole issue of, and here's an example of it, where we score these things out. It's like, okay, you know, based on the levers that we've identified for measuring these things, you know, are we experiencing answers? Is it process improvement? Is it a growth enablement, flexibility, best practice? You know, we go through and describe them, and then we can, you know, say, yeah, it does this, no, it does that, and that helps us on the overall scoring matrix.
To resort those in the project with the
Yeah,
most impact are gonna end up at the top of the list.
portfolio management, right? I mean, it's really, and the thing that's key about it is, again, measuring value. Okay, you need to understand what your levers are. They're consistently applied. There's no screwing around here, and it's like, you know, this is exactly how we're going to measure it, and it's applied consistently. I mean, you don't have the thumb on the scale effect where, you know, Mary's the senior VP and Mary decides, well, I want my project because it's important to me. It's like, nah, you know, everybody's on the same level playing field here. But, you know, these are, you know, some of these things, and then we score them out. You know, here's an example of what I call baseball cards. Typically, what we would do is for each one of these projects, develop a baseball card. This is how we go ahead and score these things. You get a whole pile of them and say, okay, which ones we want to do? What is the A tranche? What's the B tranche? C tranche? And scale them out and sort them. What are the critical dependencies? What is the value? Business disruption is critical. Change management is critical. I mean, that's one thing we haven't talked about yet is it's critical here. Is if you're redesigning the organization, redesigning the customer interaction, training for your people, all kinds of it, you know, and the whole life cycle of what people are doing changes dramatically. So change management is absolutely critically important. Okay, so this is like, you know, an example of a baseball card of what this would do. So let's talk about, so that's it in terms of the strategy. It's kind of the quick version of what we did Thursday. So let's talk about PM. Want to talk about PM?
Yep.
If anybody has any specific questions, please go. We can jump around. This is one of my favorite slides for all your project managers out there. You know, this is one of these ones where, you know, how much value is there for PPM? You know, is it really worth anything? And, you know, all you practitioners who don't think, you know, oh, PM project managers aren't worth anything. They did a whole study on this. And it said basically 62% of projects meet their goals. It really hasn't changed since 2012. And then the other one's reporting a high alignment between strategy and project. So a lot of companies, frankly, aren't doing this very well. You know, the PM function. I mean, if you're doing the project correctly, and there's bad alignment with strategy, you can have the greatest product in the world. Nobody uses it. Like the one I was telling about earlier. They've got this great customer portal that does all this information, but nobody uses it, right? Or you have the situation of doing it correctly, where you need variances and things and have contingencies and identification, strong project management. So, you know, PM is important. I mean, and it can be different kinds, waterfall based, agile based, all that type of thing. Here's one we, you know, what is the construct of, you know, these transformation programs? I mean, typically what comes out of this is you get a series of projects that come out of them, you have to execute them. And the question of always becomes, you know, how do we execute this? And typically, you know, we set up a TMO for these short term. One of the questions on Thursday was, is it part of the project management office or is it not part of the project management? If you have a good PMO, then it comes out of the PMO. If you don't, set up your TMO, then it becomes your PMO. I mean, this is really the excellence in project management.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
And I'll tell you, we did a project in Atlanta for a flight for airline software companies, you know, the reservation companies. We stood up this TMO. That's where this thing came from. That's why it says like air and agency. Those are different parts of this travel scheduling company. And they took this information, then they built a PMO for them. So it went the other way because their project management was horrible.
Right.
Yeah, because that's why they had like, you know, IBM mainframes for a lot of their software instead of, you know, modern cloud-based technologies. They couldn't scale, they couldn't grow because it's all ancient stuff. So that's what this one was. This is kind of how that works. This is one, what does a project management office need from a capability perspective? And if you do a PMO assessment, typically this is a capability model that you want to look for. And what you can do is you can score people out for current state, or you can build a maturity model and actually build out these capabilities. But these are, round out what are some of the capabilities you need to have from a project management perspective. You've got the, the overall environment-based stuff. That's your strategy. And you've got value. You've got corporate management support. Unless you've got management support, you don't do anything, right? You need to have your managers who come to you about this. And this was, the strong PMO leaders, the people who run these PMOs, typically they're good managers and they know the business and know their stuff. And I made this point Thursday. The best ones I know are the ones who can talk the talk, walk the walk. They really know they know the material. They're not just driving a spreadsheet. They actually understand what they're doing. Organization, understanding roles and sourcing, change management, understanding all the things that go into success, roles where you may be dealing with vendors. A lot of times you've got vendors out there working for you. Process, some of the PMO skills, knowledge management, financial management. Let's understand the business case. Let's understand the measure of the success. Communications and stakeholders. Then we have the whole, capabilities, demand management and portfolio management. Okay, you propose this thing. Let's run it through the portfolio. Let's run it through the portfolio management capability. Let's run it through, project management. Let's do resource management. Who's going to work on this? Things like collaboration and sites. Do we have SharePoint? Are we using how are we collaborating? Are we using Google Sheets or whatever, Hangouts? And then you get the technology side where you've got the supporting infrastructure to support this.
Is this representative of part of your maturity model?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. In fact, that's a very good comment. I mean, typically there's a maturity version of this that you can scale these things out. We've got tie degrees and you can score them out and put them on a heat chart. Heat map, and then from there they can build it out and say, okay, we're going to build these skills and not those skills. Again, not everybody needs to be good at everything, right? But there are things you need to be absolutely be good at. You need to have strategy and support. If you don't have strategy and support, you're going to fail. Some of these skills here, I think, finance is important because if you don't understand the business case, project management skills is critical going forward. And then, the overall capabilities in terms of portfolio management and project management, that's all critical to success. Yeah, so this is align your projects and resources to your strategy. That's the whole point here. Essentially, you got a corporate strategy, programs and initiatives and projects. And that gets back to the scoring mechanism, whether it's transformational, whether it's project management. It's critical to make sure that you understand the value levers that you have, and they are in fact aligned appropriately with what you're delivering. So I mean, that's what this is. And I mean, that's again one of the things. Typically, when I walk into a client, they hand me an Excel spreadsheet. Here's my projects.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's like, okay, which ones are you still working on? Well, these here. Okay, when are they going to finish? Kind of this date. Well, what's the value of these things? I don't know. I mean, who's working on it? I don't know. Steve might be available to work on this one, but Kevin is over here. You've got all these different people here that they don't know. And I think that getting that methodology and appropriateness is pretty critical. And when we do due diligences, they hand us these spreadsheets all the time, and it's like, I don't know what these guys are doing. So it's pretty important to have those skills around. This is an interesting slide. I mean, I forget. This is one we talked about, degrees of project management. And I think, it's really interesting because, you don't really want to go crazy from a project management perspective on small stuff, right? You want to have, more intense scrutiny on things that are more intense scrutiny, that are higher measure, higher impact, more strategic than things that are not necessarily as important to you. So, this is kind of a, how to spend your resources perspective. So, some general rules here. If the budget is small, you can do like basic governance, maybe a moderate when it's more complex is 5 mil. But this is just one client I used based on the size of the client. I mean, if you're a smaller company, you can change the numbers, but the point is that the degree of governance is always dependent on the sophistication of the project and the importance of the project overall. Duration, if it's a longer project, you want a more complex governance. But I mean, the governance thing, for agile sprint-based stuff, where you're doing agile development, you want to have the governance in there too. And mostly it's, completion of the sprints, but also aligned with values. after you deliver the project, is it delivering the value you're expecting? So, I mean, this is, degrees of project management. It's an interesting assignment there. Comment, question?
I just, like, do your clients represent all, I mean, I guess, I assume you're looking more to the left side.
Yes, to the left.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the ones who have a strong and mature capability are few and far between.
gotcha.
And it depends on the industry too. I mean, I'll be honest with you, some industries, financial services tends to be ahead of the curve in terms of this. You'll find them, healthcare. I mean, well, more or less, healthcare needs to be more ahead, but they're mostly have more challenges.
Yeah,
You go to like manufacturing, or, you would think, or even like construction, you would think they would be really good at it. They're good at the construction side of it,
Yeah.
but not the stuff around it.
the enterprise.
The enterprise stuff, they're not good at it. I mean, I had a client of mine who built townhouses. Their whole businesses are fly. They go to Denver, Colorado. They drop a big townhouse thing in there, and they were good from CAD CAM, designing these things and all that. But when it came time to managing the peripheral things, they were terrible at it, awful. And I've seen that with lots of other companies as well. And like the financial services, they're generally pretty good. You go to Citibank, they're pretty good. You go to JP Morgan, they're pretty good. But if you go to like, I mean, for example, oil companies, there's a really good example. I've done a lot of work recently with oil companies. To be honest with you, they're making money now. They're willing to spend. Okay. A year ago, 2 years ago, they were not spending. They were borrowing. And it has to do with the business cycle. But you go back with what the oil companies have done, and they've got the underground side, which is the drilling and all that. That's a separate piece of technology, but the above ground is what they call it, and that's PMing. That they're modernizing now, but they're way behind. Generally, it is interesting though, the differences between industries, about how the level of maturity, but it has to do with how profitable the industry is at one time.
As far as the maturity, how much does it link to where they're at in the integration cycle? Is there any correlation?
Yeah, they get better at it.
Okay.
I mean, typically when I go in, or my consultants, we go in, our job is to put ourselves out of a job, right? I mean, that's basically it. And there's nothing better that I love more than when one client doesn't need me anymore. They've got people working there who are really, really good. They've got great at their jobs. They got it, and that happens a lot. And the thing that's interesting about this is that when you're working on a digital transformation, running one of those silos, or if you're managing it, it is a huge career opportunity for you. If somebody offers you a chance to do that, do it, take it, because that's the future, right?
Yeah.
That's the future where this company's going.
Right.
The person who's running the legacy stuff, it's good, but 10 years down the road, you're gone. And I had somebody tell me once in my career when I first started out is, every day you wake up, your balance sheet gets worth less. So if you have a skill today, tomorrow it's not going to be worth as much. And that's true. We got to constantly refresh the balance sheet. This is a good example of, having the ability to learn new things.
Yep.
But, this is a Gartner IT model for business process maturity. You've got the reactive, emerging discipline, initial, effective innovation. And they, as you see, people move and they move across that chart. And you don't need to be good at everything, like I was saying. But some of the core things, the strategy side, the project management side, the finance side, those are pretty absolutely critical. Hello.
Hi, John. We've got a question in the chat.
Yep.
Have you managed engagements that were 100% agile from discovery to project close? And that's from Ajaya.
How about from discovery to project close? No, it's usually a hybrid. To be honest with you, I think the thing about agile, and I know there's scrum masters who disagree with this concept. It depends what you're doing, because there's some aspects of innovation that are more conducive to digital, to agile based approaches. There's other stuff, on the other hand, that you either do the whole thing, or you don't do it. There's no way to do incremental growth. I mean, stuff like creating digital services, mobile devices, man, that's great for agile, the sprints, lots of those. But if you're doing something like, a cloud migration, you got to get off the data center or on the data center, right? It's a binary choice. And I think that's typically what it is. So, I mean, I did a project recently with a publishing company, newspaper publishing company. And the thing that's interesting, they have a whole innovation hub where they had, IBM did all this development for them. Their whole team was focused on creating and innovating new abilities to push digital content out in the newspaper business. There's a huge amount of transformation going on there. But, some of the stuff, like their billing system, that's not an agile thing. Okay. They went out there, they did an old, long-term innovation for that. They did a bit of, a basic old, waterfall-based approach implementation, because you kind of have to bill or you don't bill.
Yeah.
So the opportunity for incremental improvement is not there.
When you go in, are you toolbox based in recommendations like that, or?
The thing about FTI, which I really like, is we're agnostic. Okay, we don't implement.
Yeah.
If
Right.
we what we do is figure out the strategy for the client, and depending upon what the answer is, we'll tell you these are kind of the partners you might want to think about, and bring other people in who actually are really good at that particular thing.
Yeah.
I mean, for project management, if we're running we're pitching on one right now. It's a large integration of a couple of big chemical companies, two big chemical companies. And we'll have like 2 or 3 people running the project management office, but actually executing all that, there'll be client people and vendors to do it. But on the other hand, the advantage of that is you're agnostic from a technical and business perspective.
Right.
So I might say, well, you should use Microsoft here. Okay, no, not really for this. We use NetSuite. It's a good product. Use Oracle's product. It's a good one. So you're not really beholden to any one vendor. So. Yeah, so this is the example we're asking. What comes out of these sessions? And we talked about the sequence of these, and when you look at how these things disseminate, they kind of fall into 3 buckets here, and it's pretty important to understand that, because like we can't, as you're saying, we can't do everything at the same time, and there's critical dependencies. You kind of have to fix things in sequence, because there are dependencies. Stabilize the foundational technology. Get on the cloud, get your mobile devices out there. You got to put the plumbing in place to get that to do these type of transformational changes. Set up your core capabilities. That's all around, organizational change management training. Getting your teams out there so they're innovative and aligned by product, which is a critical alignment. And then you get the innovation experience where you're creating and innovating new. The back. No, and I think that the question earlier about waterfall and agile based stuff, this kind of stuff, that is generally more waterfall, right?
Mhm.
Organizational change, that can be iterative. But when you get to this whole innovative experience side, that's all agile. Maybe that's the way to do that. You disagree?
What?
You look like you disagree.
No, I was thinking, because it's not hard to imagine that you lay out a high level strategy, and in the implementation, some organizations may manage to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And I was just wondering what are some of the impedances between having a well thought out strategy and a proper implementation? Because Fred, Sean, and I were having a discussion like that this morning. Because yeah, Fred is pretty tied into implementation. So I'm just trying to reconcile. Yeah,
Well, I think
have you ever been asked for advice on how to pick or how to set up the team? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
a lot. That's part of, type of work that we do is kind of helping them with this and set up this little innovation factory.
Yes.
It is a factory. I mean, it's ideas of coming up with these ideas and going through them and figuring out which ones we want to do and which ones we don't want to do. And that's why these workshops at the beginning are so critical, because, understanding value, how it's tied to revenue, so that you can translate this stuff and make it actionable. That's critical. That's what makes these things successful.
Yeah.
But you're right. Do they fail? They do when you don't have the strategy right. Because I've seen this so many times where they just do stuff. It's like we're implementing this solution. Well, why are you doing that? Why? Was it appropriate for your organization? It's some of these things that, go ahead.
Sometimes they cherry pick aspects of the strategy that they think are essential, like a lipstick solution. They just dress it up and they leave out. Yeah.
But they don't address the fundamental problem, and you're going to pay later, or pay now or pay later.
Yeah.
I mean, we did one where, manufacturing technologies, we did this, the company I was working with in Atlanta, I mean, they did not invest in their technology. And why did they do that? Because they wanted they're worried about share price, they're worried about quarterly earnings. It's like owning a factory, right? It's not investing in your manufacturing process. Your technology is your manufacturing process. It's your innovation if you're doing something like a knowledge-based output. So, you got to invest continuously and make sure you do this, because you hit the technical deficit, you're gonna have a problem. And the big problem is the lack of agility, scalability, flexibility. So. Here we go. I was gonna skip over a little bit of time there. So we were talking about prioritization on these things, and the question you're asking earlier about the prioritization. This is exactly how we do these things. We have scoring, there's fundamental scoring around it, but a lot of times you put it up on a matrix, and then if you look at it, you've got ones where low complexity, high value. There's a value axis, and then there's a complexity axis, right? And this is just a simple plot. You put this up on a diagram, on an XY diagram like this, and it's pretty obvious kind of where you want to go. Let's see, if it's low technology, high value, dude, that's easy pickings right there, right? I want to go get those right off the top. But the ones on the upper right, high complexity, high value, those ones you really got to think about really hard. And that's, remember we were talking about degrees of project management. That's what I want to do. I'm worry about this one, but also these are low hanging fruit. Get the easy stuff, right? Well, this is, kind of the thing that really makes it obvious or easy where you think you should go. And in some cases, these are the ones where it's, moderate complexity, medium value, kind of, iffy, but, up here, that's kind of where you want to fish. Yeah, here's a couple, roadmaps. This is but this is kind of how this would look with our example that we just did. This is a real client of ours, by the way. So, this is actually the way we automated it. What we're doing from month by month. We went for the remainder of the year through the 6 months. That was the one Q1, Q2, Q3. And everything basically filled in that thing. Fill the technology, fix the organization, and then do the innovation on the back end after we make the investment. It takes patience. I'd like to remember saying the prioritization. You need somebody to go to the board and say, well, we're going to be spending some money before you get some benefits here. And that sometimes can be a tough sell if you got the wrong owners, right? Or the wrong leadership team.
Yeah.
But the ones who are that consumed with the money, they're not going to innovate. They're going to want to be set behind. You need the people who are forward looking in terms of doing that. And I've been fortunate. I've met some really great executives who get that. I've also met ones who don't. And the ones who don't are the ones who don't make the investment. And then they're calling like 2 years later, guess what? I'm no longer, remember we looked at the growth ones, the stabilization and the distressed. By the way, I'm on that left box now because I'm in distressed because I haven't done anything.
Right.
So, it's like, okay, you don't want to do it. I'll see you on the left side when it comes time to have that opportunity. Here's an example plan on a page. This is one that, this is actually a real client as well. This is, Scott Mobile Mini, actually. Merger integration there, but this is all around some of the tech stuff that they did, and then they have technology pieces, but the whole OCM change management part and the organizational design part, because we consolidated those organizations to be forward leaning and making sure they understand the inventory. That was a big challenge. They get these these offices from a construction site, they have to refurbish them, turn them around, get them flipped out. They call this a flip, is what that terminology is. But this is a good example where they had to put the plumbing in place to get the infrastructure done, so they can actually perform those types of modernizations and flips. That's a big cost item to them. But they understood the strategy. They understand that having things come in and then spending a lot of time before you can flip it is a negative for that group. Yeah, here's waterfall business agile. I mean, is everyone a Scrum Master here? This is an interesting part. This McKinsey statistic here. Agile adoption, 22%, according to McKinsey. That's not very good.
No.
And then I think as we saw earlier, depending upon what you're doing, these have use cases. I mean, I've had Scrum Masters tell me everything should be agile. And I've listened to them. And I'm sitting there going, okay, then I'm going to have a 6-month sprint. I mean, that's what it's going to work.
Yeah.
It's just, and I've really concluded that there's some things that are better suited to agile and things
yeah.
that are not. And I think agile definitely has this place for rapid innovation, for things that can have small units of work. That incremental improvement is acceptable. But that's why your cloud technology helps you do all that.
Yeah. I've done a lot. Go ahead. No.
Have you worked with SAFe, Skills Agile Framework?
Yes, actually we have. That's actually the next slide up. I think I'll get that one here.
Yeah.
That one right there.
How was it?
It's good. I think I like it. I think it's a good methodology. I think it's
Something different.
I think it's worth getting the training and doing it well.
But the problem we have is 150 plus.
Mhm.
We have around like 250 plus. And we're probably thinking about having children with students.
For what? For the,
For 250 plus people.
that's fine.
That's fine? Okay.
Two, no, for 2 release streams for 250.
Yeah.
I would just make sure the transformation of the organization is aligned with that. So things that are coming down the pipeline that are agile based, that really are conducive to agile, put them on the first group. And then the stuff that's harder to transition to agile, put it into the second group. I mean, I firmly believe not everything should be an agile. I
Right,
mean, people say that all the time, but I don't buy it. In practical experience and what people are doing,
Yeah.
they're not doing that, and they should.
yeah,
It's not a solution for everything.
No, it's not.
yeah.
It's not at all.
I've done scaled and all kinds of different types, and the more I learn it, the less I think that it is form fit for everybody. It's like you said, it's just a.
Yeah, it is. It's just a framework,
It's all it is.
but it's a framework, but you gotta put, as they say, put the thumb on the scale on certain
Right.
parts of it.
Yeah,
You don't have to take the thing out of the box.
nope,
I've never found a methodology that's worked. It always has to be, this is a great idea, but you gotta tailor it a little bit. But it's good to stick with the core concepts of it. Like these sprints, you always get the person who says, throw another week in the sprint, throw another week in the sprint. Don't do it. Because if they do that, it's gonna lead back, you're gonna be in waterfall, or as they call it, agile fall, right?
right,
You've seen that one
Yeah.
before. It's gonna impact your ability to innovate and create.
right,
I mean, you know this, it's great, all these processes.
yeah,
There's implementation roadmaps. I mean, you probably have, waterfall, ad hoc, agile, all the way down to through the agile part. And really what this is all the training pieces that go along the way. And it's worthwhile to get trained in agile. I mean, I always tell people, PMI, I think it's valuable. I think it's good from a discipline perspective. Being a PMI practitioner, I think, when you see that tag on somebody, they have baseline skill, useful, right? But enhance it with this too, and that's a good piece. And I always tell like IT managers, if you want to get good at something that's a good core skill, do something like, learn about cloud, become cloud, because cloud is the core of all of this.
Yep.
I mean, everything is on cloud. So if you get certified on, AWS is great. If you do it on Azure, that's good too. But that's a great foundational thing because everybody's going that way. If you talk to Oracle, you talk to SAP, you talk to Microsoft, they're getting rid of all this on-prem stuff. It's going to be gone in the next 10 years.
Mhm.
Right. So, and from the management perspective, by the way, you want to be an SAP project manager, guess what? ECC 6 is going away. They're going to stop support. Okay. Everybody's got to go to S/4HANA on the cloud. It's good to be a manager because there are hundreds of those out there that they need to be transitioned.
yeah,
So, there's going to be a lot of work there, like, Y2K kind of on, type thing where that people are transitioning off, but pushing things to cloud, either that or, software as a service type things is the way things are going.
do you have a lot of SaaS clients?
Yes. And everybody who's not SaaS, we're putting them on SaaS.
Gotcha,
Every CIO I deal with these days, their default move is it goes to cloud SaaS. Okay, unless there's an absolutely compelling reason. Then the stuff that they have that's on-prem, either it's been customized to such an extent that they can't upgrade it without throwing it away, and then they have to spend a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the problem. Is they have old stuff, and that clock is ticking, right? Because that stuff eventually is going to not scale, not support your business. The airline company I was telling you about, they had mainframe on-prem. They were spending $30 million a year buying new storage because it turned out that when people were looking for flights, they have this thing where people want to have multi-stops. I want to go to Indianapolis and spend a couple days in Indianapolis. Then I want to spend a couple days and fly off to Michigan and spend a couple days there. And as they called it, search, right? There was, the volume was going like this because people wanted flexibility. Again, the customer experience. You got the on-prem architecture, can't support it. So they're adding all these data centers and things to do that, which is a Band-Aid, right?
Yeah.
They got to go to cloud. So they need to suck it up and spend the $1 billion, whatever it was to fix it.
So there's no longer a consideration of, hey, this is how much it's gonna cost me to have the people and keep it all on-prem versus how much it's eventually gonna cost me. Because I'm basically releasing this stuff, I don't own it, it's in perpetuity, I'm always paying for it, right? So it does cost more in the end, but is that a true statement? And
I
the
think
second
people
part
are,
of it-
sorry,
Well, yeah, and the second part is, that sounds like that's becoming no longer a consideration, because you're telling me all that on-prem stuff's going away, so we don't even
Yes.
have to hear the argument.
well, I mean, the on-prem versus cloud argument
Yeah.
is, it's cloud, and that's where people go. The exception to that has to do with pricing models, right? And for certain businesses where there's a high volume, I mean, good example, utilities and billing. Okay, we did a project up in Canada, Hydro One, right? They're the main power company there. They send out 1 million invoices a month, okay? The transaction cost on that from a licensing agreement, because typically a SaaS is as they call it, a buy the drink type model. So it's based on the number of users or it's based on the transaction. They can't afford it. And the other thing is from a performance perspective, 1 million invoices a month, you need a big data center on-prem to crank that out. And they actually had weekly billing cycles so that they could manage to get through that. And they had, they spent, I don't forget exactly the number, but it was a lot of money just for those heavy transactions. But that's the on-prem side. And the other thing you're saying, talk of software as a service for SaaS, there's also on-prem as a service where people say, okay, given you've got the high volume, there can be a business case where supporting on-prem like a SaaS makes sense. So there's a small number of, those high volume, high transaction type utilities where in fact, that kind of thing makes sense. And you're seeing that as well. Because that's the exception to that. Why people are staying on-prem is the pricing model. Because it's more of it's an OpEx based thing, it's transaction based, but if there's a huge number of transactions, usually it's you can get an enterprise agreement that says, I'm going to pay $10 million a year. Doesn't matter how many transactions you push through it, you just pay 10 million, and having that fixed price drives the price discussion. But I think technically you're right, but except for those cases where there's a lot of volume and the pricing agreement is more advantageous on-prem. And it's worth it, in that case where you've got 1 million invoices a month, or if I'm, a telephone company, AT&T, right? They got to get those bills out, something like that with just a huge number of records.
What about low volume transaction?
Cloud, definitely. Go to the cloud. That's a no-brainer. The other thing about it is, from an organizational perspective, it's, the IT models, again, the operating models. I mean, the whole thing is, I always tell people you want to have a forward-leaning IT. All you want to do is keep your enterprise architects, your project managers, your business relationship managers. You want to keep the people who really are knowledge people who design the solutions in-house. Everybody else outsourced. That's what they call the elastic operating model. It's like, you can scale up, scale down using, Tech Mahindra or Winpro or one of those other companies to do the work for you. Cognizant, pick a pick, GCS. So,
John, I have another question.
yep.
How do you work with the C-suite stakeholders who are cost conscious and are not as invested in the transformation? And that's from JR.
How do I work with the C-suite? First of all, what they're in what the kind of engagements we work with with those who don't want to invest usually are restructuring type deals. And this is an example where I don't know if I put that slide in here. The bottom line is, if they don't want to invest in their technology and their invest, that's fine. You don't have to invest, right? You can stick with what you've got. Then 2 years from now, you're losing market share. 2 years from now, the world has changed. The level of innovation and change in this world is incredible. You don't have cloud technology, you can't react to it. And you're going to be stuck in the same situation like my friends in Atlanta were, where they've got all these mainframe things that we can't scale. So typically, if you're the CEO not willing to invest and you run the company into the ground, you're going to be an ex-CIO at some point, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, the joke,
You can make recommendations, but you can't make them follow them.
I can't do it right, exactly. But typically the board or somebody else will, because there's people up there who, like if you're dealing with a private equity or something like that, who owns a company, they look at those numbers. If the management team is trying to, we'll get rid of them. No problem. I mean, the joke about with the three, you heard the joke about the 3 letters, right? Where, I'm the new CIO, I walk into a company and then my predecessor's sitting there and he goes, I left you 3 letters in here in my desk. So whenever you're having a rough day, open a letter. So, the new CIO walks in and end of the first year, things are not going well. And he goes, what am I going to do? So he opens the letter and it's from the ex-CIO, blame me, blame your predecessor. Perfect. So he goes and blames the predecessor. So it's a year later and, and still having problems, something different's going on. So he opens up the other letter and says, well, tell everybody things will get better and come up with this plan to get things better. So he does that. And in year 3, these things are still not going well. And he opens up the last letter and it says, prepare 3 letters. Okay, that's absolutely true.
Right.
So, nobody's gonna put up with that kind of thing indefinitely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you gotta remember, a CEO or a COO, they're not absolutes. Okay, they run the company today, but they have masters. The people who own the company and the boards, and any good CIO or CEO will tell you, look, we're having trouble today. Here's where we need to be. It's going to cost some money. And then if you have a good management team, they're going to make the investments necessary to do that. And that's, again, a good opportunity. If you're on a chance to get on one of these transformation projects, take it. That's the future. That's where your company's going.
But you have to deal with resistance.
Well, yes. And to be honest with you, how do you deal with resistance? I to be candid with you, you need to have strong executive sponsorship. And the point is, and I did this once where we did a transformation at a pharma company. Okay, we had one of the leaders, one of the senior VPs decided to resist, ex-senior VP. The boss took him out and said, you're fired, got rid of him. Because you can't have that. If you have a situation where people are, resisting this, they're not on board, they're not with the program, it's going to screw up the whole thing, right? So you're going to spend all this money and it's not going to come out with the results that you sold to your ownership. So, that you can't have that. And unless you've got weak leaders, they'll put up with it. But strong leaders, no. But most of them see the light. They say, yeah, we have to do this. And if they're on board and they're one of the champions, they're the leaders of the future. But the organizational side of this is really good, and having good management is key. It absolutely is. Because if you've got bad management and they don't understand the strategy or whatever, they're not willing to embrace it, you're going to fail, right?
Yeah.
And then you're toast.
So,
All right, are we done now? I think we are. Is it? Let me see. Is there anything else we want to cover? I think it's enough. Yeah, I'm trying to find this McKinsey slide. Anyway, there's this really good McKinsey slide that talks about this, the importance of being the innovator here. I can never find one. This is it right here. You're asking about people and adoption and all that. And this is a key point here. Is that this little trench there in the middle of that is,
yeah,
you've got these people and you've got time. And the thing that's interesting about this is, you've got the ones where, you've got the ones you start out with market share and have got a high degree of market share. Time goes down, okay, and then you're losing market share because your maturity hasn't evolved over time. But then you have really a decision point in your life cycle where you have to decide, do I want to embrace new technology to go to a digital business model, or do I won't? And there's several advantages to doing that. If you're the first one there, you establish yourself in the marketplace. Okay, the other person has to try to take it from you, which is hard to do. Okay, so if you've gotten there at first, it's a great place to be. I mean, Microsoft's a great example of that, right? They got the operating system, they've got it out there. Taking it away from somebody is a very hard thing to do. And then you get the ones who don't make the investment, are inflexible, and they go down. So, resistance is some way you're kind of hurting yourself by pushing yourself down into the less advantageous position. But again, having a management team that sees that is important. It's critical.
so mostly, again, left side when you come in.
You got it.
Yeah,
You start off on the left, and you want to hit this decision point here.
yeah,
Because then you become like cash cow type thing. But if you go over here, you make the investments, and your operating model can take off there, where you actually have the opportunity to establish market share. And the other one that's kind of interesting is the number here. Companies. It's really a small number of people who actually do that and do that well. And I think you're seeing a lot more. This was a couple of years, this is 2009, I think it was 2019. It was a couple of years ago. You're seeing more and more people adopting this type of models.
and what's the state of adoption?
Now,
Yeah,
30-40%. There's still a lot of companies that aren't out there.
Yeah.
It is frankly, to me, surprising. The lack of maturity of some of these companies. I mean, some of the things that people do, it's surprising, big companies, big industries are like, wow, that's shocking. And again, oil and gas, I was in the oil and gas.
Yeah.
I just happen to be doing a lot of work in that area. And, they didn't invest for a long time. They're way behind the curve. And a lot of these concepts, they're really good engineers and things, but they're not, PMs and transformation and all, they don't understand the importance of that, and it's taken a lift.
Right.
Utilities is one that they've invested significantly, but that's where you get the smart grid, right? And that's again, IoT, you're collecting data, you
Yeah.
put it in a database, there's all kinds of opportunities in the power utility space.
Yeah.
So, all right, I guess Martin's telling us we have to leave.
Thank you, John, for taking.
Thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Up this morning. Here's a small
Oh,
appreciation.
cool,
gift.
thank you. And I get the coffee cup too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Got some good stuff out there.
We have a survey link in the chat, so please fill that out. Your
Yep.
feedback matters to us.
You bet.
And lastly, our next session is a in-person workshop on the 14th of January. And the topic is practical positivity.
Good.
Is there a way to get the recording or presentation? So I haven't seen some of these slides, on Blue.
That's a marketing question.
Yeah, so we will get the slide from John. And also we will post the recording in the YouTube. So it may take maybe 1 or 2 weeks, but we have a team that we can post the recording to online. But we're waiting there.
Sounds good. And is there a way for me to find out when it's posted? Or like, are you gonna somehow notify it's on YouTube or? how
So-
does it work?
Yeah, I will send out the deck for everybody to attend this meeting.
Okay,
Once we have the recording available online, I will notify everyone.
awesome. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. That
So
would
keep
be
in mind,
helpful.
January, the speaker, he also teaches SMU. So the workshop, I think you get the free pass for the workshop. So I highly recommend you to join that 2-hour workshop. Same price, you got 2 PDU. And you will get a lot of information from that workshop.
Thank you.
Huh? Yeah.
Dave,
Dave Conley.
yeah.
That should be very good.
Right, thank you everyone, appreciate it.
Thank
Okay,
you.
you know, welcome to stay a little longer, have a breakfast. We will keep this open for another half hour, so just enjoy yourself. Have a good weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy holidays to
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. happy holidays.
Thank you, guys.
Priya, can I ask you a question?
Yes,
You said the next event would be in January?
yes, 14th of January.
Okay, will that be posted on the website, the PMI Dallas website?
I
Yes.
think registration is open currently.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll check it. Thank you.
Yeah. You go to the PMI chapter site, you will see that event, and you can go ahead and register that event.
All right, will do. Thank you so much.
Look
Welcome,
forward
thank you
to
for
seeing
joining.
you guys.
Yeah, take care. Bye. Bye.
And for anybody who